What's up, skeptics? Thomas Westbrook here. I'm joined today by the lovely Rachel Oates of the YouTube channel Rachel Oates, and we're going to be tackling the issue of abortion. Make sure that you check over for the other part of this video over on her channel. She makes absolutely fantastic content, and while you're over there, make sure that you smash that subscribe button to follow her for more amazing videos.
I definitely felt that the Lord wanted me to shoot the abortionist.
How did we get here? How is there so much hatred and vitriol surrounding just two questions? When does a fetus become a human being? And when, if ever, is it okay to terminate a pregnancy? So much heated anger and division flares up over two questions that can easily be answered with a brief walk through history and a little understanding of biology. In the iconic 1973 case Roe v. Wade, the US Supreme Court ruled to grant women the right to choose to have an abortion. State governments were prohibited from blocking this access in the first trimester or 12 weeks of pregnancy. They were given permission to place reasonable health regulations on the second trimester up to 24 weeks and could outright ban abortion in the third trimester except in cases that would put the mother's life or health at risk. Around the world, ultra-religious countries tend to have the most restrictive abortion laws, but at least 59 countries place no limits on a woman's right to choose within the first 12 weeks of pregnancy. Most of these countries grant abortion rights after the first trimester as well, with certain limitations, for example, to save the life of the mother. At least 14 of these countries extend that right to an elective abortion without limits even further. A few don't have any limits on when a woman can get an abortion at all, others limit it to 20 weeks or later. But why is there no universal consensus? Where should this line be drawn? To determine that, we need to first ask what we're trying to protect. Obviously, a woman's self-determination is important. If anything is going to supersede and restrict that right, it can't do so without serious justification. What are people fighting so hard to protect that could be more sacred than this? Is it life in general? Because humans consume billions of pounds of animal meat, hunt living creatures for sport, squash bugs, kill parasites, and destroy and pollute entire habitats to make room for our own. Even celery is alive. And while I in no way condone all of those actions, well, fuck celery, it's clear to see that it's not all life that we value, at least not all to the same degree. No one goes to jail for murdering a banana or swatting a fly, or swatting a fly with a rotten banana. No, it's specifically human life that we value above all else, but not even all human life. A single human cell is clearly living. It's clearly human. And each of my cells contains all of the genetic information or DNA necessary to make a clone copy of me. Every time I scratch my bum, I'm slaughtering 100 Timbuktu's worth of potential me's. And yet I've never stood before the Hague for crimes against humanity. We don't value human cells. It's not even all potential humans that we care about. Every egg and sperm is half a potential human, but if we really worried about maximizing potential life, sperm banks and fertility clinics would be bursting at the seams with guilt-ridden horn dogs attempting to prevent a salty holocaust. What humanity universally cares about is human beings. But what does it mean to be a human? Humans are sapient, entertaining complex thoughts. Humans have emotions and feelings of pain and pleasure. Humans can hold these things in memory. But whether someone has Down syndrome, severe amnesia, leprosy, or psychopathy, all of those things which make up the human experience can be lost. While their absence detracts from the human experience, they in no way diminish the value of that human's life. What I'd like to focus on instead is the human capacity for sentience. Even hospital patients in a comatose state still have complex brainwaves keeping them alive, and the hardware capable of sentience and consciousness. But every single one of the characteristics I listed above is not possible without a complex brain. Without the brain, you cannot experience any sensation or qualia. You can't feel emotions. You can't process or experience pleasure, pain, or suffering. Without the brain, there can be no consciousness. You are your brain. Brain death is literally clinical death. When your brain goes, you go, and there's no coming back. You're pronounced dead. And if you're an organ donor, that's the point at which you've consented to be chopped open and have your organs harvested to save the lives of others. Without your brain, you have nothing but reflexes. And while even these skinned frog legs have enough ATP stored in them to trigger an action potential of reflexive movement when you pour salt on them, that doesn't make them living organisms. Without a brain, you cannot be a human being, because you cannot be. But if we're going to draw the line of human becoming at the crossroads of the formation of complex thought / brainwaves, at what stage of human development does that occur? While the first primitive electrical signals can be seen around 6 weeks, it is extremely basic and is far less complicated than even the nervous system of a shrimp. Even though the ability for basic muscle reflexes exists early on, no pain receptors, consciousness, or ability to process pain or move deliberately exists at this point. According to the renowned neuroscientist Dr. Michael Gazanigan, by the 13th week, the brain is developed enough for us to visually distinguish the different lobes, and the fetus can perform basic non-reflexive movements. Yet the fetus is not a sentient, self-aware organism at this point. It is more like a sea slug, a writhing, reflex-bound hunk of sensory motor processes that does not respond to anything in a directed, purposeful way. Laying down the infrastructure for a mature brain and possessing a mature brain are two very different states of being. The mass linking of neurons required for sentience and human thought don't really kick into high gear until the end of the 6th month, which coincidentally just so happens to be where Roe v. Wade drew the legal line protecting a woman's right to choose, except in cases where the life or health of the mother is at risk. And yet, despite the logical science-backed reasoning behind why abortion not only isn't murder but should be freely accessible, Alabama recently banned and criminalized almost all abortions outright. In Christian and Muslim countries, abortion is often illegal, and in Nicaragua, women caught having an abortion, even if it's to save their own lives, face lengthy jail sentences, as do their doctors. But what are the consequences of such laws? Well, first off, if the aim is to reduce the number of abortions, they don't work. Recent data published in the Lancet Medical Journal found that the per capita rate of abortions in countries where abortion was prohibited or severely restricted was actually slightly higher than in countries where it wasn't. Just because you ban safe abortions in hospitals doesn't mean you'll eliminate abortions. Instead, unregulated abortion pills will flood the black market, creating an illegal drug trade for them. Unsafe back alley or coat hanger abortions become the dangerous alternative for the desperate, leading to skyrocketing rates of preventable deaths and injuries of pregnant women, filling hospitals to the brim.
When you restrict access to abortion, people die. Whether it's accessing unsafe abortion or taking matters into their own hands, it's a long known phenomenon.
I was a victim of sexual assault by 4 different men. I took 4 servings of abortion teas.
Why did you do it that way?
Oh, because I just didn't have the money. I had all my homeboys and homegirls punch and kick me in the stomach. Oh yes, it was brutal.
The wealthy can resort to abortion tourism, but don't need it as much because they can usually afford birth control. But the poorest in society will give birth to countless unwanted kids born into horrific abject poverty. With more kids than they can feed or educate, the poor will get poorer, crime rates will skyrocket, and the number of abandoned kids will vastly outnumber the number of foster parents willing and able to take care of them. And guess what? These kids will probably get pregnant as teenagers and have more unwanted kids that they're not ready or able to properly raise, perpetuating the cycle of poverty. Women who currently can just take a pill, pass a cluster of cells, and go about their lives trauma-free would be heavily stigmatized and face the emotional turmoil of thinking they committed murder. Oh wait, that's already happening right now thanks to abusive, emotionally traumatizing pro-lifers like these horrible people.
Well, adopt your baby.
Jesus, have mercy on us. Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner. Young lady, you don't have to be a murderer this morning, young lady. Don't listen to the wicked counsel of these orange-vested people.
Furthermore, if we criminalized abortions, prisons would be sardined full of women. And even women who miscarry naturally, if simply suspected of harming their child, could face jail time and would have to lawyer up during an already emotional, painful time. Women with pregnancy complications where an abortion could save their lives would die instead. And even if the child is wanted, when the fetus dies inside the mother due to natural complications, rather than a quick and safe dilation and extraction, the mother would be forced to go into risky, excruciating labor for hour after traumatizing hour only to give birth to a stillborn corpse. Oh wait, did I mention that this is currently standard operating procedure at Catholic hospitals? They won't even tell you that the safer, less horrific alternative exists when counseling you on what to do with the dead baby inside you. If abortion were illegal, many women unable to care for a child on their own would be forced to stay in horrifically abusive relationships, sharing custody with violent monsters, and the rate of unwed mothers to fatherless children would also hit the roof. And as the total fertility rates went atmospheric, overpopulation's cost to the environment would be devastating. These are the real-world consequences of restricting abortion access. But if the goal is to limit the amount of abortions that happen late in a woman's pregnancy, then it should be noted that even just making it harder or more expensive / time-consuming to get one has the complete opposite effect, since it forces women to get abortions later in their pregnancies, and the whole time the baby is growing and becoming more human-like inside of them. If pro-lifers are okay with first trimester abortions but oppose later term abortions, then restrictions on access have the opposite of the desired effect. But while I'm making the case for abortion, I want to be clear. Nobody loves getting abortions. Although about 1 in 4 women in the US will get an abortion by the age of 45, none of them are thrilled at the idea or wake up one day and say, hey, I really want to get pregnant so I can go out and get an abortion. Even though access to abortion should be easy, legal, and hassle-free, is there a way to effectively bring down the rate of abortions without restricting access to them? Well, for that, I'll turn things over to Rachel.
Hey everyone, so first up, huge thank you to Thomas for working on these videos with me and inviting me on his channel like this. In this video, I'm going to be talking about some proposed, solutions and suggestions for how we can reduce our need for abortions. This isn't an exact science, these are only a few suggestions, so if you have any more, please let us know down in the comments what you think, and if you think any of these will work, if you have any better ideas. I know both me and Thomas would love to hear from you guys on this matter. I think one thing that most people can agree on is that no one really wants to have an abortion. They are a last resort for pretty much everyone who has one. It would be so fantastic if we as a society could reduce the number of abortions that are carried out. However, as Thomas has showed, the way to do this isn't by banning abortion or reducing access to abortion or making it more difficult to get an abortion. That's not going to help anyone. Easy, safe access to abortion is a necessity, and we can't pretend it isn't. However, there are steps we can take to reduce the number of people who need abortions in the first place. I think the first and probably easiest way to do this, I would argue, is provide better sex education, both for young people, teenagers, and adults alike. Abstinence-only sex education, without a doubt, does not work. Sex is a natural part of life. It's a fun, healthy way for consenting adults to express their feelings for one another. And it should never be shamed, it should never be hidden. We shouldn't just not talk about it. Teaching that abstinence is the only way to do things, to live your life, leads to naive, ignorant adults who are more likely to engage in risky sexual activity because they don't know any better. By talking openly with both young people and other adults about what sex is, what consent is, how to give consent, how to, receive and understand consent, talking about contraceptive options and helping people understand what is the best option for them, by taking the stigma away from using contraception, by showing people how to correctly use condoms and other contraceptive methods, to teach people not to be embarrassed about asking their partner to use condoms or use something else. That's how we reduce the need for abortions. That's how we reduce unwanted accidental pregnancies. We need to teach people to value and respect and understand their own bodies and their partner's bodies. We need to teach people the tools that give them the ability to feel in control of their own body and everything that happens to them. We also need to teach women to just understand their bodies a lot more, teach them about their menstrual cycles and how to, understand them, how to know when they're ovulating, how to understand how long their cycle is, how to pick up on patterns, and being aware of when your period's due, when you're ovulating, can drastically reduce your chances of unwanted pregnancy. I'd also argue that easier, cheaper access to birth control is essential. And again, we need to reduce the stigma around using it. We can't have people ashamed or embarrassed about using any method of birth control. And we should also not understate its importance. I see a lot of people preaching the idea that, no method's 100%. The only way to really prevent pregnancy is abstinence. But that's unrealistic and naive. Nothing is 100% effective. Not medication, not vaccines, not seatbelts in cars, not brushing your teeth, not sun cream. But we still use them because some safety is better than none. Reducing the chance of something bad happening is better than doing nothing. Just because sun cream isn't 100% effective, we don't tell people to stay in dark little holes and never go out in the sun, do we? That would be impractical, just like expecting people to just never have sex. Abstinence-only education also really screws over the people who want to engage in adult relationships, but they don't want to ever have children. It shames them for that not wanting to have children, and it doesn't help them at all. Educating people on a contraceptive method that's, say, 95% effective, making sure they understand how to get it, how to use it correctly, is better than pretending that it just doesn't exist or doesn't work at all. The other upside is by reducing the stigma around certain contraceptives and making access to them easier, is going to reduce the number of STIs that people get as well, particularly with using things like condoms. Similarly, increasing the access to the morning after pill and making it cheaper is going to be a huge, huge advantage, and is going to help reduce the number of abortions needed. I'm sure everyone would agree that it's better to prevent a chance of a fertilized egg implanting in the uterus lining than having to go through an abortion later. Simply because the morning after pill doesn't have the risks and possible side effects that an abortion does have. I actually used to work in a pharmacy, and the amount of women who would come in and they'd be so embarrassed to buy condoms or get their pill on prescription, or if they'd need the morning after pill, they'd whisper quietly and not make eye contact and be like, I need the morning after pill. And it was a little bit sad to see, actually, that these women felt ashamed of these completely normal, responsible things. I knew a few women who I worked with, and whenever a woman came in to ask for the morning after pill, they'd never quite make eye contact with her, and they'd just quietly usher her into the consultation room and give her some pitying looks and be like, I'll go get the pharmacist for you, love. And I was just like, you're making this worse. Here's a woman who is doing the responsible thing and saying, I don't want to have a baby. So even though an accident happened, maybe a condom broke, maybe she forgot to take her pill, something like that. Even though an accident happened, she's being responsible and preventing a pregnancy before it begins. Don't shame a woman for that. I always just try to be as casual about it as possible. I'd be like, yeah, cool, no worries. Take a seat, I'll go grab the pharmacist for you. And I'd try and make it as normal and as non-weird as possible, because it should be normal and it shouldn't be weird, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. A woman doing the responsible thing and taking responsibility for her body, understanding her body, taking control, that's not something to be pitied. That's something to say, good on you. You're a strong person, you know what you want, and you're going for it. The last point I want to raise is perhaps more of a slightly controversial one, and so I'd love to hear your opinions on what you think of this one. But I would argue that a big way to reduce the number of abortions that take place or that are needed is to normalize the choices of people, women in particular, who want to remain child-free by choice. Not everyone wants to be a parent, and a lot of us know that from a young age. And for some people it changes, but I'd argue that for the majority of people it doesn't. To admit you don't want children is still a really difficult thing in today's society, because so many people tell you, you're being silly, you'll grow out of it, it's only normal to want kids. I know because I've heard it my whole life. A lot of women who know they don't want kids want to get sterilized because, no chance of unwanted pregnancies. But it's still so difficult for women to get sterilized. They have to jump through so many hoops. It's such a long process. They have to go see counselors and meet with these people and these people and these people. And even then, there's a chance they're still going to be rejected for it. And during that whole massive long process, there's still a risk that they're going to get pregnant when they don't want to keep the baby. Increasing education and reducing the stigma around this is essential, and I think it would be so great if more people spoke up about not wanting kids. I don't think that having kids should be the default normal position anymore. We should just be accepting that there are people who want children, there are people who don't want children, and both are perfectly okay. And of course, I think it's worth mentioning that even with all these preventative measures, even with the most careful people, even with the best education, the best intentions, we're never going to remove the need for abortion completely. Accidents still happen. Condoms break. People forget to take their pills. Other medication interferes with your contraception. Some people just get their times and dates mixed up. Some people have no control, for example, if they're raped or sexually assaulted and that results in a pregnancy. In these cases, again, we need to destigmatize abortion, and we need to make sure that they're easily accessible, we need to make sure that they're affordable, and we need to ensure that the women who need abortions can get them as soon as possible. Remember that the earlier a woman can have an abortion, the easier, the quicker, and the safer it is, and there's no chance of a fetus getting to a point where it can possibly suffer. Anyway, like I say, these are just a few of my ideas. I would love to hear your thoughts on this matter, so let us know down in the comments how you think we could go about reducing the need for the number of abortions in the world.
Thank you guys, as always, for watching. This has been an absolute blast, and it's been a pleasure to have Rachel here in studio with me here in Austin, Texas. Make sure that you don't forget to go check out part 2, which is even better because it's on Rachel's channel, and hit that subscribe button while you're over there. And as always, dare to be curious.
But don't drink the Kool-Aid.
What do you think makes a woman want to have an abortion?
Well, there's probably a lot of. I'm not a woman, so I'm thinking now. If I'm a woman, why would I want to? Yeah. Some of it has to do with economics. A lot of it has to do with economics. I don't know. I've never. It's a question I've never even thought about.
If you appreciate the work that I put into this video, please consider supporting my work at patreon.com/holykoolaid on a per episode basis. And to all my current patrons, thank you so much for your ongoing support.